Chet Nagle is going to wrap up the live portion of this. We'll have one more video afterwards. And in the previous discussion, we did tease a little bit this nightmare of another potential dependency. Perhaps, thanks to President Trump, not in our own country, but that remains to be seen. But certainly in a lot of other places around the world, including many that are considered to be vital allies of this country, what the Chinese Communist Party, doing business as a state-owned telecommunications conglomerate known as Huawei, is up to, with 5G and, for that matter, 4G and 6G and on, is extremely important to the national security and quite detrimental to it. To tell us about that, I'm very pleased to have a former director of the Committee on the Present Danger, a naval aviator, and a man who has served with distinction in the civilian ranks in the Pentagon as well, Chet Nagle. Welcome.
Roger is a hard act to follow. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here today to tell you yet again that we are at war with the Chinese Communist Party, and that we've been at war with them for decades. It's not yet a war involving ships and tanks and aircraft and seizure of territory, and I hope that day never comes. And that day will never come if President Trump correctly plays the wonderful cards that he now holds. These cards have been detailed by Kyle Bass and just heard Roger Robinson. We not only control the financial game, but we control lots of other things. Communist China declared war on us about 40 years ago, and we didn't even notice. In fact, we helped them. We believed, our senior leaders believed, that Communist China would join the Western world as a friendly Asian partner, if only they were no longer shunned and were invited to join the West's international organizations. And so, three American presidents helped China to join the Western world. The first president to rescue the Chinese Communist Party was Richard Nixon. In 1972, he recognized Communist China and ended their diplomatic isolation. He called it the week that changed the world, and he was very right. The second president was George Herbert Walker Bush. After the Tiananmen Square massacre, an event that caused the United States and other horrified nations to levy sanctions and bans on China, in 1989, he sent a secret delegation to Beijing. This was a very senior delegation. It consisted of his national security advisor, Brent Scowcroft, and the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Lawrence Eagleburger. They went there to assure the Chinese Communist Party that the United States would not shun them. When he died last year, the Communist Chinese Party honored Bush for his ignoring the student protesters that was slaughtered at Tiananmen Square by calling Bush in an old friend of the Chinese people. The third president to help the Communist Chinese Party was Bill Clinton, of course, who enabled the entry of Communist China into the World Trade Organization. Now we fast forward to 2018. President Trump and his advisors recognized that Communist China's plan to build the new 5G mobile communication system was a direct threat to American national security and our economy. The tip of that spear remains as Huawei. And the president's effort to blunt that sphere began with asking our ally Canada to arrest Huawei's chief financial officer for crimes, Meng Wanzhou. Canada did so, and therefore was bullied by China, and some people with Canadian passports were arrested, and lots of pressure was applied. But so far, the Canadians are standing fast as we attempt to extradite Wanzhou to the United States to answer in court for the crimes. On the heels of Wanzhou's arrest was further confirmation that Huawei's 5G equipment, like Hikvision equipment, is equipped with backdoors. We've heard this before. These backdoors enable Beijing to read all the traffic that goes through such equipment. They deny that, of course, but this has been emphasized over and over again, not only by our security people, but by other security agencies of allies. This has impacted on Five Eyes, as you know. These are the English-speaking partners who respond to this at differing levels, but are aware. Of course, if any one of the partners adopts Huawei equipment, we would not be able to further advise them of security risks and sensitive information, because Beijing would read it. So as a result of this effort by the Trump administration, and despite the low prices of its state-subsidized equipment, Huawei's plan has been reduced to a crawl in several countries, including the United States. Trump then banned Huawei equipment from American 5G networks, and subsequent bans were imposed on American companies selling advanced high-technology equipment and tech components to China, which further hobbled Huawei. This is extremely important to the Communist Chinese Party. As a result, they always bring it up in the context of trade talks. The fight with how Huawei goes on, and it must go on, and we must prevail if the Trump administration is to successfully defend our national security. Nevertheless, some individuals, companies, and government officials are worried that we won't reach a trade deal with China, and they don't understand that the Chinese Communist Party is waging what they call unrestricted warfare against us, and that they fully intend to dominate the United States in as near future as possible. We've heard here from Steve Bannon that this assault on our security has three prongs. There is Made in China 2025, there's the Belt and Road Initiative, and then there's Huawei and the 5G system. These Americans that I just mentioned don't get it. They don't get it just like the 661 companies and trade associations that signed a letter last month that was reviewed here today urging President Trump to drop restrictions on Huawei and make a deal with Beijing. They don't get it, just like the companies trying to evade sanctions on sales of computer chips and software to Huawei. They don't get it like Secretary Mnuchin and Economic Advisor Kudlow, who urge that waivers be granted to chip manufacturers so they can continue to sell to Huawei, so their revenues won't suffer and their share prices won't drop. They don't put it in exactly those terms, but that's what it's all about. But some Americans do get it. They know we're in a war that we must win, or we'll see the end of the American way of life. As Kyle Bass noted, among those who get it are a bipartisan group of senators and congressmen, senators initially, who want to lock in the ban on Huawei. And they want to keep the Huawei issue out of consideration in the trade talks. It's not to be a bargaining chip to get trade talks. They want to ensure President Trump will not ignore the threat to national security that Huawei represents, no matter what pressure Beijing brings and holding out the carrot of successful trade talk. So these legislators will have overwhelming bipartisan support, and they will be able to pass a bill that does just that with a majority that is veto-proof by the president. That bill will bypass the president's executive orders, and it will also prohibit Huawei from doing business with any American corporation without first getting congressional approval. I don't think Senator Rubio will give such approval. What's the bill's name? It's wonderful. It's Defending America's 5G Future. So senators and congressmen of both parties get it. They understand that a trade agreement in exchange for lifting the ban on Huawei would support the Chinese Communist Party. It would be a deal that would constitute America's fourth rescue of Chinese communism. The message they're sending President Trump is, don't be the fourth president to save the Chinese Communist Party. Thank you.